Hello everyone, my name is The Fox. In this video we're going to be reviewing Anbernic's latest handheld, their RG35XXSP. It should be clear where they got their inspiration from. They actually do something really clever here. When you're running the RetroArch side of things and play a GBA game, they apply a shader that mimics what the GBA kind of looks like, but they also place a border on the bottom side of the screen, which mimics the actual border of the physical GBA, where there is a physical border, but this is actually just a border that is on the LCD itself. What winds up happening is, because that border is there and this screen is technically 640 by 40, a 4:3 screen, not a 3:2 screen, which is what the GBA is, what winds up happening is that that border bumps up the screen so that it can be 3:2, so that the GBA games that you're playing are going to be the native resolution that is on the display. It's really clever and super effective. When you take a close look at it, I mean, side to side, when we have that type of LCD, that LCD look that's on the GBA, there is a shader that is on the GBA side of the RetroArch emulation. All told, it's really, really convincing. So kudos to Anbernic for doing that. They do apply other shaders and borders on other emulators on the RetroArch side. If you just go into the regular emulators that are not RetroArch, those won't have much any scaling or borders or layouts included at all. Going along the idea of comparing the RG35XXSP to the GBA SP, there's a few things that I want to make clear here. When looking at the dimensions of the RG35XXSP versus a GBA, overall it's not that much bigger. It's slightly thicker and a bit wider, however it is as tall as a GBA SP, so form factor wise and dimension wise, it's relatively similar, but they're in two dimensions. It's a bit bigger. Is that terrible? No, not really. The only thing that I would say is that while Anbernic really went for authenticity in terms of how it looks overall, so that it's very, very nostalgic when you look at it, the reality is that I would probably have preferred either going to a larger screen or keeping this same screen and shrinking the overall dimensions so that it matches the GBA SP, but we have a bigger screen that's just min-maxing, much how like the Miu Mini min-maxes that display onto that tiny device. Having this gigantic border over here is very, very retro. I don't know if it's absolutely needed. This is a little bit of a nitpick. Overall, it's fine. I'm not saying that it's bad. The next thing that we have to compare against the GBA SP, though, that a lot of people may find contentious is the buttons. Now, the buttons on the GBA SP are dome-based. However, they're very soft. They don't require a bunch of pressure to actuate, and they're not loud at all. Not the shoulder buttons, not the face buttons, not the D-pad, not the start and select button, not even the LCD brightness button. All of those buttons barely make any noise whatsoever, whereas the RG35XXSP is sensationally loud all over. It's kind of as loud as an Xbox Series X D-pad is, to give you an idea of how clicky that gets, and pretty much every button is like that. When you directly compare both of the consoles together, it's not fair, because the RG35XXSP feels alien, right? When we think about like, oh, it's trying to be authentic to the GBA SP, and when we're thinking about authenticity, if you go from that angle, you're going to feel like the buttons feel cheap. I think that is a harsh criticism for the RG35XXSP, because the D-pad, the dome-based D-pad that is on here, quite literally is the best D-pad that Anbernic has made. Now, I am very biased towards dome-based D-pads. You should know this by now. The reason that GPD has Vita D-pads is because I asked 5 years ago if they could be inspired by that and include that in their handhelds. I love a Vita D-pad. I love dome-based D-pads. And the dome-based D-pad that is on the GBA SP is sensationally accurate. The precision that you can get out of the D-pad is fantastic. In terms of me having any question whatsoever about what direction I'm pushing in, there is no question whatsoever. For fighting games, this is outrageously good. Really, really good. So yes, it's loud and clicky. However, it's fantastic. Now, it doesn't feel anything like a GBA SP. However, it's still really, really good. This is my favorite Anbernic D-pad yet. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. It is going to be divisive. I think that's going to be people that don't like it because they want something that's far more GBA-SP-like. However, I think it's awesome. So I just wanted to get that out of the way first when we're talking about this. The next thing I want to talk about is obviously performance. We've talked about this at length. The RG35XX has been available. The XX Plus has been available from Anbernic for a while now, so largely this isn't new to us. The type of performance that you should expect is similar to those other devices. So basically, we're going to be taking a look at Dreamcast and N64 as the top tier emulation that's available. Now, we don't have an analog stick on here, so you're going to be using the DPAD only for N64, and games like Wave Race on N64 won't be running at perfect frame rate. You will actually hear stutters. It'll be kind of struggling to get across the finish line. So that is pretty much the top end of emulation of what you should expect. Most all Dreamcast works, and that also works for like Dreamcast arcade games as well. Those are all very playable and don't really hitch at all. So that is the top end emulation. When we think about everything below there, you're going to have a really good time playing most everything. And I would suspect that a lot of people would want to get this for GBA purposes. It is a very fun handheld for GBA. That form factor with the border that's up there and the shader that's on top goes a long way to really making it feel like a GBA SP. Now that we've gotten performance and what to expect out of this from the emulation side of things, the next question you should be asking yourself is what kind of battery life should we be expecting on the RG35XXSP? And truthfully, the battery life is pretty good, much like the other devices that Anbernic has made. The typical battery life test that I do is going to be PlayStation 1 emulation with all default settings, so it's 1x resolution scale. And the game I usually run is Crash Bandicoot 3. This game is going to emphasize CPU and GPU in a certain amount of respect. I'm not going to be pushing it as hard as N64 or Dreamcast will, but it's not going to be as little as some of the other emulation devices like something like Nintendo emulation. This is going to be middle of the road, but even still, when we take a look at this, we're looking at 7 hours and 45 minutes of battery life, almost 8 hours of battery life that we're getting with PlayStation 1 emulation. So the battery life is going to swing around this area. So somewhere under 8 hours and somewhere over 8 hours, but generally speaking, you're going to be at 8 hours of battery life, which for the size of the device and what's on here, absolutely sensational. Since we got the big parts out of the way in terms of GBA, SP comparisons, performance, and what you can expect out of emulation, battery life, what other features are available to us on the RG35XXSP? Thankfully, Anbernic has included Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on this device. So yes, it does increase the cost a little bit. We're looking at somewhere around $60, $65 shipped. The first 3 days, they have $6 off, so it's probably going to be like $62 shipped. Once that goes off, you're going to be looking at $60, maybe $70 shipped. So somewhere around that range. It is going to be a little bit more expensive, but overall, I think it's very, very worth it, especially because we can actually do retro achievements on here. And one thing you may not be aware of is that you can earn retro achievements while offline. Now, it's not the best situation, but one thing you can do is when you're home and you have this connected to your own Wi-Fi connection, you can load up a game, go to retro achievements and see that it's loaded. Once it's loaded, you can just close the lid, put the game in standby, go ahead and put the device in your pocket, go and leave your house, go into a parking lot, open it up, and then while you're completely offline with no Wi-Fi anywhere near you, you can still earn achievements offline. Just don't disconnect the game or reset the game or turn off the game. Keep it running, just stand by the machine, and as long as that's still running, all of those achievements will still be collecting and still be there. Once you get back home, open it back up, resync with retro achievements. You don't have to do anything. When I say resync, literally just go home, open up the device, and just look at retro achievements. Then it will sync with retro achievements. So you can still earn achievements on retro achievements while offline, with the caveat that the game that you loaded initially online, and don't disconnect that game when you're going about. Which honestly, as long as you just have one game that you're interested in playing and it's on standby, it's easy enough to just open up the lid, start playing the game again, and then close the lid and then put it back in your pocket when it's in standby again. It's as you would expect it to work, and it's just fine. So that's an avenue for playing retro achievements that I think a lot of people may not be considering, but it's something that I do, and I'm most likely going to be carrying this around with me a whole bunch, just like I did my GBA SP. Another feature that is pretty cool is this does have HDMI, and it's not something that I normally really care about, but because it's a clamshell device, I don't know, sometimes I get a little carried away with what I think and expect out of this. Now, you may be asking yourself, if I plug HDMI in this and the device is open and I plug HDMI and it's going out, when I close this, does the device go in standby? Yes, it does. However, if you just go ahead and plug in power in USB, the USB-C port, so USB-A to USB-C, that's even if you have like power on the back of a modern TV. Most modern TVs have a USB-A port. They're typically for service ports, but they're like normally 500 milliamp at 5 volts. So you can get 2.5 watts out of that, which is enough to actually charge the device and run the device. So that's still just fine. But as long as you put in that power while the device is closed, it'll wake back up and HDMI out will start going. So if you wanted to use this device with HDMI and close the clamshell, you just need to be able to power it. And that's it. As long as you can power it, then you're pretty much just fine. With Bluetooth, you can connect Bluetooth controllers and stuff. So if that was something that you wanted to do, that's an avenue that you can take it. For me, handhelds are typically singular use, so it's very personal. While you do have the ability to play with friends and family and connect it to a TV and play and do other stuff, that is cool. It's just that realistically, that has never actually happened in real life for me. Whenever we're going on vacation, you could have thoughts of actually being able to do that. But typically when we're on vacation, we're out and about doing things, what you're going to vacation for. And we're so beat that afterwards that we'll just go to sleep. It's never been a situation where anyone's really willing to play a game. Everyone kind of just wants to watch TV and fall asleep. But if you are the type of person that knows you're definitely going to be using HDMI out, yes, you can close the lid. Just make sure you have a USB-A to USB-C to plug in and power this device, which typically you should have to actually charge the device when you're on about. So hopefully you should just have that. And again, modern TVs have USB-A out on the back, so then that's pretty simple. So can I recommend the RG35XXSP? Yeah, I totally can. I could always recommend any of these other devices. The price of these are fantastic, but this form factor and what they've done here, all the little bits that they've done, the automatic way that they put up the border and the shader use that they use for GBA games, without having to go and do that yourself, is a very nice touch, and they do it for a lot of other stuff in the RetroArch settings. If you don't like that, you can use other emulators that are also on this device that are not RetroArch. So you have a lot of functionality here. You have a 4:3 screen on this, so if you wanted to put up other videos, it's a video player on here as well, so if you wanted to play 4:3 videos, you could do that as well. There's a lot of things that you can do with this device, and for how cheap it is, and the form factor of it, this is probably my favorite form factor of all, and it is, without a doubt, the best DPAD that Anbernic has ever made. But I can understand that because it's not exactly like the GBASP, that a lot of people might find that divisive. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about getting this, but overall, everything that they included in here is a winner. Thank you very much to my YouTube channel members as well as my Patreon members. Your guys' support really means the world to me. Thank you very much. I hope this video was informative. As always, guys, thank you for your time. And thanks for watching.